Hello students, let's begin with chapter life processes today. Before we understand what exactly is life processes, let us have a small discussion on how exactly we identify whether an object is alive or not. That is to say, in what terms you differentiate between living and non-living things. After considering the coloration of the plants and the breathing movement of the body, the two common terms which we generally think first to decide whether something is living or not is movement and growth. Movement and growth are the two common terms which we normally think about to differentiate something as living and non-living things. Growth, you know, is the increase in size of the object, increase in size of the body. What about movement? Moving from one place to another place we call movement. Now, how are we going to use these terms to differentiate living and non-living object? You have a rock, it grows in size, but it takes many years. But does it move from a place? No. So let's consider the example of plant and animal. Both are living organisms, but still there is only one term of these two is seen visibly in both, that is growth. When you see a kitten growing into an adult cat, you see the size increasing. In the same way, when you see a sapling growing into a tree or a shrub, you see the size increasing. Next, coming to the movement, you have cat in one corner of the room, place a food few feet away from it. What does it do? It gets up, moves towards the food and picks it up. Can you expect that kind of movement in the plant? No, because the plants are fixed. They are fixed in one place. We cannot expect the plant to move from the place where it is fixed to another place. But still there we can see some movement. For example, if you take examples of sunflower plants, mornings when the sunrise is happening, the flowers turn exactly towards the direction of the sunrise. That kind of movement is also considered to say something is living. In more detailed terms, when you cut the stem of a plant, you see a small fluid falling onto your hand or your finger. That how is that coming? You are not pouring the water onto the stem or into the stem from the flower. You are just watering the plants near the roots. How is the water reaching to the top part of the plant? It's because there are some internal movement happening. So such internal movements, unless they happen inside the body of a living organism, they cannot show or bring out external changes like movement and growth. Simply, the internal movement brings out external changes to differentiate something as living and non-living organisms. Consolidating this concept, let's see the definition of life processes. Internal movement of molecules by certain chemical processes to maintain the structure and normal functioning. When we say the structure and normal functioning, when there is some internal movement happening inside the body, it increases in size, which is where growth happens. When there is some internal movement happening, it shows some changes like changing the position. That is where the movement happening. For you to understand even more better, in grade 9, you would have learnt chapter cell, where you would have been taught that all living organisms are made up of cells and tissues. In turn, these cells and tissues are made up of very tiny molecules which keeps on moving or performing some activity to keep the cells and tissues alive. That internal movement is what exactly we are talking about as life processes. So, let's see the definition again. The internal movement of molecules by certain chemical processes to maintain the existence of life is what we call as life processes. Is that clear? Now, when I say life processes, it is not just the simple movement of molecules. There are four major processes that define the term life processes. The four important processes that is required for any living organism to be alive are nutrition, respiration, transportation and excretion. Repeat, nutrition, respiration, transportation and excretion are the four main life processes which can be seen in any living organism that continuously happens in it to make it alive all the time. Clear? Before we understand each of these terms or each of this concept, let us have a different idea to understand the same four processes. Now, to generate electricity or to produce electricity, we need coal. Coal is the raw material which an industry requires to produce electricity from it. Now they have taken the coal. Now is it enough if we have the coal? Does the electricity produce on its own? No, we need to burn it or we need to ignite it. What do we use to ignite the coal? We use heat. Large amounts of heat. So the raw material is there, the heat is there, which acts on the raw material and generates the energy. Now the raw material is done, the heat is done, the energy is produced. Now the energy is distributed to all the place around the industry. Now when all these three steps are happening, we also see some smoke or toxic waste being produced from the industry, which is not at all useful and highly toxic. Now keep these four concepts in mind, which will be easier for you to understand the four topics of nutrition, respiration, transportation and excretion. Nutrition. The general term nutrition is to obtain some energy. Now we have told all living organisms are performing some internal movement continuously. Unless they have some energy in it, they cannot perform that processes. Now how is that energy acquired? It is by intake of food. Food can be of any form, but the food has to be taken in. That process of taking in the food is called nutrition in living organisms. Now the raw material or raw source of food is there. What do we need next? We need something to break down that food, because we living organisms take anything outside the environment into our body as food. That includes mostly carbon-based molecules. Now these carbon-based molecules are highly difficult for the cells inside our body to digest them. So to digest that carbon-based molecule, we need the help of another substance, which is what we call as oxygen. So how any living organism takes the oxygen inside and uses this oxygen to break down these food and release the energy is what we learn under the concept respiration. Now the coal is there, the ignition is there, the energy is produced. Now how is the energy that is produced in our stomach reaches all the cells of the body? How is it reaching? It is through the transportation process. You know the meaning of the word transportation is transporting something or carrying something from one place to another place. Isn't it? In the same way, the energy produced in our body has to reach all the cells for further utilization. That process is taken care by a separate system or a separate concept called transportation. That's why we have written distribution of energy. Now, like I said, in the industries, along with the electricity, the smoke and the waste is also released out. Exactly in the same way, all living organisms, when they are performing any process in their body, when I say any process, the first three processes like nutrition, respiration and transportation, obviously there will be production of some byproducts which are not only useless but are highly toxic, that has to be removed from the body at any cost. Now that work is carried out separately by the process called excretion. Now this waste that is useless and toxic can be in the solid form, liquid form or gaseous form. Now all these three forms of useless toxic waste has to be removed which is specially carried by the excretion process. Is that clear? Nutrition is the intake of food. Respiration is intake of oxygen so that we can use it to break the food and release the energy. Transportation is distribution of the energy that has produced in our body, and the excretion is the removal of the waste, useless, toxic byproducts that has been forming along with the other processes. Is it clear? Now, after understanding all this, you will definitely have a question saying that, ma'am, when you have told that all living organisms are made up of cells and they perform all these four processes in it, how does a microorganism, which is just a body of one cell, perform all these four? Microorganisms are microscopic in nature, cannot be seen with the naked eyes, and they do not have specialized structures like how we humans or animals or plants have. They are just one cell bodies. Most of them are just one cell bodies. It's a good question to ask how those microorganisms are producing performing all the four processes. Let's take the classic example of amoeba. You know that amoeba is a single cell body or a single cell structure, has only mainly these three structures in it: the cell membrane, the nucleus, and the food vacuole. Now let's understand. Now this food vacuole which is there, as the name pronounces, when it captures the food, it takes in the food through the cell membrane, through diffusion process. You would have learned what is diffusion in your chemistry classes. It is the movement of molecules from higher concentration region to a lower concentration region. Now when this amoeba is in need of food, it is obviously meaning that there is no energy inside it and there is lots of energy in the outside environment. So automatically the cell membrane will adapt itself to absorb the energy from outside into the cell. Now the nutrition is done. That's exactly how the oxygen is also taken inside the body of amoeba. Clear? Now nutrition and respiration is done. And in your lower classes you would have also understood that when the amoeba gets the food vacuole engulfs that food, digests it, and once the energy is produced, the food vacuole itself destroys itself and releases the food just like that into the whole body of the amoeba. Now the food vacuole is performing it. And how is the waste removed? Same through the cell membrane. So the cell membrane alone is capable of performing most of the important life processes in the amoeba. Why I have to explain you this process of amoeba is, simple organisms have simple structures to make them perform all these four functions. As the size and complexity of the organism increases, the structures present in the organism also increases to enable themselves to perform all these four processes. Take example of us. Now we are considered as highest capable organisms in the world. We are mammals and we are human beings. Now we have separate system to take care only about the nutrition. There is a separate system to take care only about the nutrition. It has nothing to do with respiration. The same way, separate system. When I say separate system, it is the inclusion of cells, tissues, and organs. All these three together forms a system. Now, the nutrition will have separate advanced cells, tissues, and organs to perform this process. The transportation will have its own separate cells, tissues, and organs to perform the transportation function. Likewise, as the size and complexity of the organism increases, the cells and tissues inside also develops itself to enable and perform all these functions. I think we are clear with the concept of life processes. Let's move on to the first concept, nutrition. I think you know what is nutrition. Now nutrition, as I said, is intake of food. Before we go in deep about nutrition, you need to know what exactly the term food implies when coming to living organisms. Here I have mentioned two terms, organic and inorganic substances. You know that we living organisms take the raw materials from the outside environment and utilize them to produce food inside our body. Now when we say raw materials, that could either be organic substances or inorganic substances. Clear? Let's move on to the definition of nutrition. Nutrition means the process where how a living organism takes inside the food and utilizes it to release the energy and make use of it for various biological activities. It's not just that you eat the food, you got energy, that's all only for the stomach. The food which is going inside your stomach is generating the energy to distribute to the whole body of yours, right? So the process of how any living organism intakes food and utilizes it for various biological activities. When we say biological activities, it is any process that is happening inside the body of a living organism. Now, I have mentioned separately as nutrients. I could have mentioned the term intake of nutrients. If I have mentioned the term nutrients there, you would have got confused because we don't take nutrients, we eat food. It is later from the food we get the nutrients. Clear? So nutrients are those substances which could either be organic and inorganic present in the food which any living organism obtains from outside environment to synthesize the energy. Synthesize means to produce energy. So we eat food. We normally eat food. Any food we eat has either organic or inorganic substances. It is from those substances our body synthesizes the required nutrients and makes us to utilize it for normal functioning. Is that clear? Now when I say nutrition, before we see the types of nutrition, you need to understand that as humans we have hands to cook and grab the food. Do animals use it? Does a microorganism has hands to cook and use it or to grab something? No, it is different. So, all living organisms perform nutrition but in different patterns, in different modes. That is what we are going to see under types of nutrition. Now, two major types of nutrition are autotrophic and heterotrophic. There are only two main types of nutrition. One is autotrophic, the other one is heterotrophic. Here, when I say auto, the term auto means self. Trophic is again a Greek word which means nutrition. Okay, so autotrophic means self-nutrition, which means the living organisms which are capable of producing or preparing food on their own inside their body with help of few raw materials from the environment perform autotrophic mode of nutrition. And such organisms are called autotrophs. The living organism that performs autotrophic mode of nutrition are called autotrophs because using very few raw materials from the environment, they prepare the food inside their body and synthesize the required organic nutrients for themselves. Now I have mentioned the inorganic raw materials here. Carbon dioxide, water, air, minerals, etc. By seeing these raw materials, you must be having an idea which organism exactly we are considering here. Exactly, we are considering plants. Plants and very few certain bacteria are the only living organisms in the world which are capable of utilizing these raw materials and preparing food inside their body on their own. Clear? Now these autotrophs perform autotrophic mode of nutrition. Now second one I said heterotrophic. You already know what is the meaning of the word trophic. It means nutrition. Hetero means other nutrition. Hetero means other or outside. Trophic means nutrition. Now when I say other nutrition, these are the group of living organism which depends on the other living organism and their products to obtain the energy for itself. It cannot prepare food on its own like the autotrophs. It has to depend either on autotrophs or on other fellow living organisms and their products to produce its energy in the form of organic molecules. You might ask a question. You mentioned what is inorganic molecules. Let's see what are organic molecules. The organic molecules are carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, etc. If you see in even more chemical terms, it is going to be difficult. So let's stick to biological terms like carbohydrates, proteins, fats and vitamins. These are the organic substances compared to the nutrition. Clear? Now these heterotrophs are mostly animals. Animals, birds, microorganisms, all these which depends directly or indirectly on plant, its products and other animals to get their food. Now, not all animals obtain food only from the plants, right? Are we eating only food? Are we getting foods only from the plants? No, we expect something from the animal and their products as well. Likewise, here also the animals which are called heterotrophs because they perform heterotrophic nutrition are classified into three other types: holozoic, saprotrophic and parasitic. That is, the group of animals which depend on other living organisms to obtain their food are called heterotrophs, which perform heterotrophic mode of nutrition. In turn are divided into three main types of nutrition. First one being holozoic, second one is saprotrophic, third one is parasitic. And in some books, the word saprotrophic is also written as saprophytic. Both means the same. Clear? Now, the holozoic, saprotrophic and parasitic are the three types of heterotrophic nutrition which we can normally see in animals. Starting with holozoic. Now, holozoic, I have written example man. It is not just human beings, it also includes other animals. I'll tell you why. Because the group of animals which has to take in solid food substances inside its mouth, break it, digest it and then get the energy are considered holozoic heterotrophs, are considered to perform holozoic mode of heterotrophic nutrition. Clear? They have to take in solid food substances, break it, digest and then get the energy. Clear? So they are called as holozoic mode of heterotrophs. The second one is parasitic. Most of us are very much aware of parasitic mode of nutrition. Now here you have another term associated with it called host. Host is an organism on which or inside which the parasite will be feeding on the nutrition. That is, for example, you can take example of a worm. Many of us have stomach infections getting identified with a worm in your stomach or intestine, isn't it? That worm can be considered as a parasite and we are the host there because inside our body where the nutrition is produced, that parasite is directly sucking out the nutrition. Another example for a parasite which is feeding on the living organism is mosquitoes and lice. What does a mosquito do? It sucks the blood. Why it has to suck the blood? Because the blood is the medium for the transport of energy in our body. So when it sucks the blood, it is directly sucking out the energy also. So that is what we call as parasitic mode of nutrition. Lastly, saprotrophic. Saprotrophic mode of nutrition is in a way helping the environment, maintaining it clean because these organisms are special organisms which feeds on dead and decaying organic matter. For example, try this at your home. Collect some rotten vegetables in your kitchen, dig a small pit in your garden, put those vegetables inside it, wait for 4 or 5 days and then dig out and see. You won't see the same shape and form of the vegetables which you put in there. What happened to it? The microorganisms, the worms or the ants inside the soil has used those as their food source and utilized it to get their energy. Such organisms are called as saprotrophic. Now, because of such saprotrophic organisms only, much of the environment around us has been maintained clean. Is that clear? Now, holozoic is where the solid food is taken inside and digested. Only then we can get the energy. Now, parasitic mode of nutrition is where another living organism lives inside or on the other living organism so that it can feed on it without killing the host. Saprotrophic is where the organisms feed on the dead and decaying matter. Have I made it clear for you? So if they ask you what are the two major types of nutrition, it is autotrophic and heterotrophic. Clear? So next class we will be starting with nutrition in plants. Remember students, in life processes, just like how we had an example of a plant and animal to understand what or how exactly you identify whether it is living or non-living, each and every process we will be discussing an example of a plant and an animal. So in the next class we will be discussing about nutrition in plants. Thank you.